So the first ingredient is 2 cups of almond meal, and apparently almond meal differs from almond flour, but we've used almond flour each time we've made this recipe and it's come out wonderfully. Next ingredient is a cup of old-fashioned rolled oats. We always have this ingredient on hand. It's great in cookies, muffins, breads, granola. Next ingredient is an optional one. It's a 1/2 cup of chopped nuts. Now we don't usually add this because my husband's not a big fan of nuts in baked goods, but I bet it would be delicious with that addition. Next ingredient, 1/2 cup of dried fruit. They suggest currants or raisins, but we actually use dried dates because it adds a really nice sweetness that's not as overpowering as if you were to add chocolate chips. Next ingredient, 2 teaspoons cinnamon, 1/2 teaspoon ground nutmeg. Both of those spices will add a really nice warm flavor to the muffins. Next, some baking soda as a leavening agent, then some salt just to emphasize those sweeter flavors. Next, the recipe calls for 3 beaten eggs. However, as I said, we use flax eggs. And next, the recipe calls for a cup of grated zucchini and a cup of grated carrots. So this time, we ran into a little bit of a pickle. I actually wasn't able to purchase zucchini. So we're actually going to try this recipe out with a cup of grated apples. And my husband used 2 apples while he was grating the apples to get to that amount we needed. When we use zucchini, we usually only use 1. The carrots, we found that a cup of grated carrots equals about 2 carrots. Next, 1/3 of a cup of Greek yogurt is about equivalent to the amount of butter that the original recipe suggests, so that's what we use. Then 1/2 a cup of maple syrup and a teaspoon of vanilla. It's also suggested that paper muffin cups are used to line your muffin tin, but I'll show you that once the batter is finished. So unlike most recipes, this recipe I actually bother to mix the wet and the dry separately, and I always like to start with the dry first. In this bowl, I have 2 cups of almond flour, and I'm going to add the oats, the dates. Let's go for the nutmeg, and I believe that that was 1/2 a teaspoon, but as with any recipe, you add as much as you feel that it needs. So if you make it and you just think that 1/2 a teaspoon isn't cutting it, it's most likely not going to hurt anything if you add a little nutmeg, a little extra nutmeg, although I would caution you because I feel like nutmeg is kind of strong. However, with the next spice we're going to be using, I can't imagine that there's such a thing as too much cinnamon for this particular recipe. And in reality, when you're baking or cooking, it's all just for your personal preference because at the end of the day, you're making it to eat. So if you just want to go ham with the cinnamon and the nutmeg, maybe add a little cloves or pumpkin pie spice in there, that's not going to hurt anything. Just doing a little bit of salt, a teaspoon. Oh no, it's actually 1/2 a teaspoon, I lied. That's okay. You know, before I really started baking, I never really understood why it was important to have salt in your baked goods, but I definitely feel like in instances where I haven't used salt, it's been lacking. Not sure if you just saw our beautiful cat on camera, but she wanted to come say hi and make sure that I was doing everything right. Because honestly, it's a little hard to talk and measure things, but it's okay. I'm just going to take a quick second to make sure I got what I need in my dry bowl. And the way this recipe is broken up is really user-friendly because it starts by listing all of the dry ingredients and then it lists all of the wet ingredients. So in my dry bowl, I have my almond flour, my oats. If you were using nuts, you would put them in with your dry ingredients, but as I mentioned, I'm not. I have my dates, I have my cinnamon, and my nutmeg, and my baking soda, and my sea salt. So that is it for the dry ingredients. I'm just going to get this whisked up, and then I'm going to go ahead and switch gears to my wet ingredients. And honestly, if you have someone to help you grate up the zucchini or the apple or the carrots, it definitely makes this whole process much easier. These muffins are definitely not complicated by any means, but definitely some of the prep work is time consuming. So again, if you can get help, it really makes things easier. So as of now, the bowl with my wet ingredients is empty, so I'm just gonna start kind of with the easiest thing first. There is my approximately 1 cup of apple. We use Gala apples, but I imagine any apple would be good for this. If I had the budget, I would have used Honeycrisp apples because I love Honeycrisp apples. Now I'm just dumping in my carrots. And always make sure to wash your produce, even if you're using it in a baked good. Whatever you're using it for, wash it. You don't know who's been touching it. All right, so now I'm going to put in my maple syrup. And you know, I don't use anything fancy. I just get the $13 one from Walmart. It's pretty good. All right, so now I'm going to put my flax egg in here. And typically, we don't let the flax egg sit, but we did want it all ready for filming. So it's definitely a little bit thicker than it would be if you just dumped the flax in the bowl and dumped the water in the bowl, but it's not a problem really either way. All the recipes for flax eggs say that you need to let it sit, but you don't. We've cooked many and baked many a time not doing that, and it's always come out fine. All right, I'm just getting my yogurt in there. We're Greek yogurt snobs to a degree. We used to just use the Walmart one, and now we try when it's available to get the Fage 2%. It's much, much better. If you don't like Greek yogurt because you think it's too sour creamy, you're just not eating the right Greek yogurt. All right, so we're just gonna let that go. Leave that precariously balanced. So the last wet ingredient is my vanilla, and that's just a teaspoon. Now I'm not sure if vanilla bean paste would work for this. I imagine it would, but I also imagine that you would end up using a different quantity because it's almost like this is tomato sauce and vanilla bean paste is tomato paste. And similar to what I was saying about the cinnamon and the nutmeg, if you feel like you want more vanilla extract, you're going to be the one eating this. So that's up to you, and I hope you enjoy, regardless of how much vanilla extract you put in. So once I get the wet ingredients finished, I'm going to dump the dry in and get all of that mixed up. This looks good to me. This almost looks like a carrot apple pancake. Just as a side note, when I realized I wasn't going to be able to get zucchini, I had no clue what to use as a substitute, and Google wasn't very helpful. I did see a couple of places that apple was suggested, but I guess Google didn't realize I was using it in like a baked good. So it's very moist, but that's okay. It looks similar to that with the zucchini as well. The texture this time might be a little different because it's apple instead, but it'll still be great. But what was I saying? Oh yeah, about the substitution. I don't think Google realized that I was going to be using this in a baked good, so they were like, just use another type of squash. And I was like, no, I don't think yellow squash would taste good in this. And I don't want to risk it because almond flour is expensive. So when I make baked goods with almond flour, I definitely experiment less than I would if I was just making it with white flour. Although a few months ago when you couldn't get white flour, I wasn't experimenting with anything. Now things are a little better, so it's okay. All right, that looks fantastic. Sometimes when we've made this, even with the zucchini, the texture has differed a bit, but this is generally a very thick batter, so don't be alarmed when I show you how it looks. Okay. So it's thick, but that's okay because we're gonna spoon it into the muffin cups. Well, apparently you guys weren't able to see that. There you go. So it's thick, but as I said, we're gonna spoon it into the muffin cups. So, all right. So let me show you. A very pretty lined muffin cups. And of course you can use a cookie scoop or something other than a spoon, but we just kind of find it easier to use a spoon, so we use a spoon. And again, with a cookie scoop, it'll probably be more exact, but we kind of just try and fill up the big spoon, but I'll drop this. And just to get it in there. So we're going to get these filled and then we'll come back and show you how it looks. Getting my arm workout in holding this up. So these are the muffins prior to baking, and once the video's finished, we're going to pop them in the oven. Now I did want to say a couple of things about the muffins themselves. Although there is a leavening agent in them, they don't rise. And it might be because we use flax eggs. We've never actually made them with real eggs, so feel free to experiment with that and let me know if they rise more with actual eggs. My other comment is, with the flax, they are a little oilier, so I have actually devised the best way of baking them for our oven. So the baking instructions say bake them at 350 degrees for 25 to 35 minutes. So we usually bake them exactly halfway between that, which I believe is 22 minutes and 30 seconds. Then we turn the oven off and leave the muffins in there with the oven off for 10 minutes. And they come out perfect every time. I will display some pictures at the end of the video of how they come out when they're baked, but I hope you end up baking these and I hope you really enjoyed them. Bye.